Okay, hey, we are going to kick off today, continuing our talk about reptiles. Today we're going to focus on characteristics of reptiles, or if you want to think of it as adaptations that have enabled them to live a very different life than their amphibian predecessors. I do want to be careful here as I talk about the evolutionary history of things, where we go from fish to amphibian to reptile. Clearly, there are still fish. Clearly, there are still amphibians, etc. And so it's not that one necessarily gave rise into the other, but think of it more like histories. And amphibians existed first, and a branch of the amphibians came off to become the reptiles. It's not like the amphibians as a whole are transitioning towards being a reptile. A branch of them found a more advantageous route to survive and to go down, and therefore becoming what we now know as reptiles today. So wanted to clear that up from the last couple lectures there. It is not fish become amphibians, become reptiles, but a branch of each has extended out and advanced the family tree in that way. So anyway, what are those adaptations we're talking about that enabled this new life completely on land, free of water for the most part? And you'll see all of these have something to do with making it easier to live on land. One, they have a strong and bony skeleton, and then feet with claws. All right, so they adapted these, they kind of have their ends of their appendages. They adapted this extra keratin at the end and tools, essentially, is what that's for. All right. Once again, strong bony skeletons, heavier frames that made walking on land easier than are their aquatic-based ancestors. Two, ectothermic still. All three of these groups are fish, amphibians, reptiles, where we've gone through so far. They're all ectothermic. That means they're cold-blooded. Now, an important clarification about being cold-blooded, it doesn't mean they're cold. It just means that their temperature is set by their surroundings, unlike us as people. As people, our body temps are 98, 99 degrees. You set your own thermostat. Ectothermic animals, the environment sets their thermostat. So I have a pet turtle. Big Mike is his name. He needs a heat lamp during the day, well, at night too, because he can't regulate his body temperature. His environment has to as he's going. Four, they lay amniotic eggs. We'll get through that. We'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to birds. But they lay eggs that now have a shell that is independent to water. So amphibians and fish lay those jelly-like eggs inside the water. Reptiles can lay eggs on land. Five, respiration complete with lungs. Six, their hearts, we are starting to have a partially divided ventricle. Unless you're a crocodile, then you got four heart chambers, just like humans do. And then internal fertilization. So when it comes to sexual reproduction, egg and sperm meet inside of the host, inside of the mother, and then the egg is formed around that embryo there. So some of those adaptations. Here's a look at those the scales that they have adapted. The reptile scales are going to be a little different than fish scales. Reptile scales give them waterproofing. Okay, it's keratin based, the same thing that your fingernails are based out of, and it makes them waterproof. And think of it, it's not like they're preventing water from coming in as their goal. They're trying to keep water from leaving. That's their main goal there. And they're very successful. Reptiles live in some of the driest climates on Earth because of this waterproofing adaptation that they have there. Look at the circulatory systems like I was talking about. Remember, fish chamber, 2 hearts, amphibian chamber. Let me back that up. A fish heart, 2 chambers, amphibian heart, 3 chambers. Now we have a reptile heart that has like a 3.5 chambered look. It really wants to have 4 chambers, and we say that they do, that they have the 4 chambers. They're still a little divide when you're looking at lizards, snakes, and turtle hearts. Crocodile hearts are very similar to human hearts in that they have 4 separate chambers that are all divided up and more efficient that way. So we're seeing kind of that next evolutionary step in the circulatory system going through there. With the eggs, I think what we need to focus on, I don't want to focus on all these parts right now. What I want to do is just focus on this. What is an amniotic egg? An amniotic egg is the egg that a chicken lays is an amniotic egg. It contains a water and food supply for the developing embryo and can be laid on land. So it's this kind of a miraculous little package of here's an egg with the embryo inside, everything that embryo is going to need to develop into a baby, and it can hatch out of that egg. This is the first reptiles laid the oldest amniotic eggs on Earth. If you want to talk about who laid, what came first, the chicken or the egg came first, but it was not from a chicken. It was laid by reptiles first when it comes to our understanding of eggs. So it contains a water and food supply for the developing embryo. And the big thing there is it can be laid on land. Amphibian and fish eggs have to be in the water. That ties their lifestyle to bodies of water. They can never venture too far from them. Amphibians can't, that is. And they're bound by that. The amniotic egg means that you can travel across land, you can drink water as you need to, and you can lay your eggs and reproduce wherever. You don't need to return back to any kind of fresh water source there. That also means, though, that they have to be fertilized internally. So sexual reproduction has to change there because you can't lay the eggs with the shell first and then have the sperm deposited over them. Doesn't work like that. They're waterproof there. So amniotic egg. There's a bunch of parts to it. I'm gonna focus that more when we get to the birds. The parts are roughly the same in there. Yeah, those what those parts do. Once again, that's gonna come more when we talk about birds. All right, types of reptiles, last part of today. And we're going to be spending 3 days on this. So 3 separate lectures. Oops, go back. So when we talk about our different orders, for reptiles, there are 4 main groups that we divide all reptiles into. The first one is probably the easiest to remember, Crocodilia. Guess what? That's what it contains, the crocodiles and the alligators. The next one is Testudines. That contains the turtles and the tortoises. And the third one is the weird one that Matt covered today, the Phenodata. And then the fourth one is the largest one. We'll save that to the end, and that is Squamata. Okay, those are lizards and snakes, and that's by far the biggest group as far as volume of species go. So the one I'm going to cover today, the Phenodata, they're the weird ones. All right, there only contains the species of the Tautara. It is found in New Zealand. They look very lizard-like, but anatomically there's some pretty big differences in there. They don't have any external ears, and then a weird thing they have is they have a third eye. It's different than what you think. Their third eye is located on top of their head, and it's not a fully developed eye. It's actually kind of a clear spot in their scales, and then underneath is it'd be the pineal gland that senses light and dark. So it's a third eye that gives them a sense of, is it daytime or nighttime in there? Interesting note for human anatomy, you also have a third eye. Maybe no one's ever talked about this. It's buried deep inside your brain. It is your pineal gland. And as your optic nerves go back into your head, they cross at this point called your pineal gland, and that senses light and dark is what it does. And so that helps regulate they call it the circadian rhythm. So it helps regulate our when do we feel tired, when do we feel awake, and that's based on input of light and dark cycles there. So there's your little human anatomy tidbit for today. Hey, that's it for reptilian adaptations. There's a bunch more that we're going to cover in a reading assignment after this notes presentation. Have a good one.